Hi everyone, this week we're going to look at revising. I know, a thrilling topic, but what I've done is once again I prepared a PowerPoint which highlights the key aspects of the chapter that I would make sure that we really went over thoroughly if we were in class. What I would like to do in this video is give you, from my personal experience working with students at A&T, what seems to work best as far as revising techniques. And so the first thing we'll talk about is the proofreading. Okay, now proofreading is looking for those content, formatting, and typographical errors. The best thing you can possibly do to improve your proofreading skills is finish the writing, get a good night's sleep, and then look at it again. Working ahead is crucial. You see, the biggest problem we have when we revise anything, particularly when we're doing the proofreading aspect, is that when we go back through and read our document, what we actually read is what we intended to say rather than what's actually typed on the screen. Okay, it's very hard to distinguish that because we remember what we were trying to say and what the ideas is, so our brain goes ahead and finishes the sentences for us as we're reading it. And because of that, we may not actually recognize what's on the paper or on the screen. So the best thing you can do is write, put it away, get a good night's sleep, or preferably 2 nights sleep, and then try it again. Now we can't always do this. For instance, if you have to immediately turn around a text message or an email to someone, well then the best thing you can do is make it look different than it did when you wrote it. For instance, if you're writing an email, well, you may want to print the email out and then proofread the hard copy. Okay, not exactly green. So instead, perhaps you would like to take the email, copy the text, paste it in a Word document, change the font, text, and color. That way, again, it looks different. That will really help you with the proofreading because it's going to help you see what's on the paper. Another thing that's really helpful is actually reading your message backwards. So instead of reading, "Hi, how are you? I'm fine," read, "I'm fine, how are you? Hi." That helps us read one sentence at a time for typographical errors without knowing where the next sentence should be going. So those are my proofreading tips for you. Next, talking about clarity of your writing. The 2 biggest things that I see that we tend to do, because we've learned to do this in literary classes, is writing in a pretty style such that we use rhetorical questions and cliches. Never ever use a rhetorical question, which is a question you ask without looking for an answer, or a cliche in business writing. There are 2 reasons for this. Number 1, you don't sound original. Okay? There are lots of cliches that we use that are just defaults, ways to say, to get an idea across without having to think of our own original way of doing this. Okay, rhetorical questions. If you end your idea or your argument with a rhetorical question, then you're not actually spelling it out to your reader. Okay? You're leaving the burden of figuring that argument out, what the end of it is, what the solution is, on them. And you should always spell things out clearly so that there's no misunderstandings. So what we know from the literature is that in Maine, these 2 clarity errors, these 2 prevalent clarity errors, which are using cliches and using rhetorical questions, make the reader perceive that you, the message sender, are less educated and or lazy because you're not bothering to think of your own original way to explain your thoughts in their entirety. So make sure you don't do those. All right? Next thing, conciseness. Okay. Pretty much at any given time, we can always be more concise in what we're saying. Again, we talked about E' last week. Writing an E' is a great way to break down our conciseness. Some other things that you might want to look for is make sure that you leave out the redundant language. The example I give you in your PowerPoint is saying, this is a vitally important idea. Well, vitally and important mean pretty much the same thing. Again, we've learned to stack adjectives in literary classes, but for business, we want to get our point across as concisely as possible. So just saying it's important or it's vital works just fine. You don't have to do both. Okay. Additionally, leave qualifiers out of your writing. We talked a couple weeks ago about how your word is ethically bonding in the business world. So you're never going to say anything that you don't know to be true, that you can't defend. So qualifiers like I think and I believe don't belong in business writing. If you can't state something as absolute fact, don't say it. And that's 2 more words you get to leave out of your writing. Okay, so finally, is your writing interesting? Okay. The biggest tip I have for you here is use an active voice when you're writing. One of my biggest pet peeves, and something that I see a lot in writing, especially thank you notes and cover letters, is I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to thank you for taking the time. Now that's kind of polite, but what you're actually doing is saying that I would like to thank you, but I'm actually not going to do it, because you're using a passive voice. Don't use a passive voice. Actually thank your audience. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for taking the time. It's fewer words, and you actually do what you intended to do, rather than just saying you would like to and then never getting around to it. So those are my biggest tips for revising, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.